Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Steve McDonald. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Marketing here at UJA. Really grateful to have you with us for the next hour. We're going to give people another minute to log on. We see the numbers are climbing by the second, so just stay tuned for one more minute while people are joining. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve McDonald. I'm the VP of Communications and Marketing here at UJA. If you just joined, we're going to kick things off right away, although we see that people are still joining, so the group is going to grow as we progress. So grateful to have you with us today for this briefing. As you know, we've been doing these briefings in the past few weeks and months to keep you updated about what's happening, particularly in the area of combating anti-Semitism, what we're doing, and what you can do to make a difference. When we were preparing for this update today, and we really put a lot of thought into preparing what we want to update you on and give you and really to give you the information you need in order to be involved. Just looking at the list of items that have come up just in the past week or so is pretty astonishing. There's so much happening with the fight against anti-Semitism. Our adversaries, as we all know, are very active and are not shy about pushing their toxic agenda. But so too, our community is involved and engaged and is pushing back in a very, very meaningful way. And so we've got a lot to get through today. Of course, we're going to open it up to Q&A after we give you an update. Really important for us that we hear from you as to what's concerning you, as well as your suggestions and ideas for what we can do as a community to elevate our efforts to combat hate. So we're going to start with an update and then open it up to Q&A. If you do have questions before we get into the update, feel free to drop them into the chat function on your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can. And with that, I'm going to kick things off by introducing you to two of my colleagues here at UJA. We're going to hear from Sarah Lefton, who's our Chief Development Officer, who's going to give an update on some of the big developments that have taken place in the last week or so. And then we're going to hear from Ryla Bramer, who's UJA's VP of Community Mobilization and Volunteerism, who's going to give us an update on some important programs and opportunities for community members to make a difference if they want to get involved in the fight against anti-Semitism. As we said for some time now, really since the beginning of this post-October 7th period, this is one of those challenges that requires as many people in the community as possible getting involved and making a difference. We have many great agencies out there. UJA connects with more than 100 of them through our work. And there are many more grassroots groups as well that we're engaged with and supporting. But at the end of the day, this is one of those challenges that impacts every member of the Jewish community. And we need as many people as possible involved, speaking up and making a difference. And there are many ways to make a difference. So with that, I'm gonna turn things over to Sarah Lefton to give us a brief update on the latest developments in the fight against anti-Semitism. Oh, Sarah, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry. Okay, sorry. So we started to do these calls right after October 7th, and it's we've increased the frequency and tried to do this now every other week as a moment where we can really share with you, the community, what's been going on, how we're addressing anti-Semitism and our current reality, real time, but also to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions. And so really, if you have questions throughout, we do have team members who will be writing back in the chat. And also we're happy to allocate a significant amount of time of this call to answering those questions and providing as much insight as possible. I'll share that all of this has been going on. UJ has, and our leadership, volunteer leadership, we've been spending quite a bit of time recalibrating and looking at a bigger picture in terms of what we can actually do to push back against the horrific anti-Semitism that we're seeing. And so over the next few weeks, you will start to see some really exciting and bold new initiatives come forward to the community, and I'll start to share them on these calls as they progress. Right now, I want to talk about one thing that we've really identified as being a significant priority, and that's the holding anti-Semites completely accountable, publicly accountable for their behavior and for how they are showing up in the community. And one of the best ways that we've identified to do that is through lawfare, through legal accountability. And it's an area where, frankly, UJA has been quiet in the past. We've done some of this work always, but we haven't necessarily shared it as publicly. And so I wanted to share with you today some of the things that we are doing in the area of lawfare to push back and to hold those who are espousing anti-Semitic views accountable. So right now, we all know that campus is an absolute hotbed of hatred and anti-Semitism. And so first and foremost, we are actively engaged in supporting many students, specifically from TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, U of T, OCAD, Western and Queens, and other universities as well, with hate on their campuses. Some of you may know, and we've mentioned this on previous calls, that UJA and CJA, our partner, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, has set up basically what is a pro bono law firm called the Legal Task Force. And it was set up actually years ago, and it was much smaller, and we sort of took things on ad hoc. But since October 7th, this group has really developed into, as I say, a pro bono law firm with well over 250 leading lawyers from the city of Toronto who are senior in their respective fields. The 250 lawyers who are part of this are divided into 13 different divisions, one of which deals with unions, one deals with university campuses, one deals with public school boards, one deals with the area of criminal law and things like that. But each area has a group of specialized lawyers who have agreed to take cases on a pro bono basis. Now, I don't want anyone to think that the only lawfare that we're engaging in has to be done in this way through these pro bono lawsuits. There are moments where either we need to pay filing fees, we need to have a reserve of funds that are available in case costs are awarded against us, or we need to actually fund a piece of litigation that's going to go into the courts and is going to require sustained effort. But there are literally thousands of complaints and incidents that are taking place where we need a lawyer to be able to write a letter, attend a meeting, usher something through quickly and try to achieve very, very quick results. This isn't sort of protracted litigation, but areas where lawyers can really add value and support people who are experiencing anti-Semitism. And that is primarily what this legal task force is doing. So we've been engaging on these campuses, and we have actions either that have been commenced or that are starting on these university campuses. We also have more than 100 incidents that have been formally reported that the legal task force is right now dealing with, where students or parents on campus have reached out, and we've partnered them with a lawyer who's able to assist them in either drafting a formal complaint or navigating the process of filing a grievance with the university, or even perhaps attending meetings with students. We have lawyers who are attending meetings with students with their university administrations. We don't want our students to feel alone. And the same would go for it's not just hundreds at this point, but it's thousands. We have over 3,000 people who have needed support in their workplaces. And so we have lawyers who are supporting them. Sometimes we've had some instances where universities have been helpful. We've had other instances where, that I'm sure you can imagine, where students feel their concerns are not being addressed. And our team of lawyers then really spends time evaluating what the legal avenues are that can be pursued in those instances. The Legal Task Force also, in collaboration with CJA, helps public school students as well. So we have, as I mentioned, a full division of the Legal Task Force that's focused on providing assistance to Jewish students who are experiencing hate or discrimination in the public schools. And we have many of these complaints coming in, and we're providing support there as well. We've also noticed a really troubling trend of frankly, doxing of Jewish professionals particularly doctors and teachers. We've seen huge increases in anti-Semitism, specifically in these spaces, education and in healthcare. These are targeted campaigns against members of the Jewish community, trying to ostracize or really isolate, I'll say, Jewish healthcare workers, Jewish doctors, and things like that. And so we've assisted at least 50 individuals at this point who have been targeted as part of this harassment campaign. So our team of lawyers is working on that as well. We're going to drop contact information for the legal task force in this chat now. So if anyone has questions or if you have concerns, we're very happy to partner you with a lawyer or frankly to raise it with the task force if it's a bigger issue. A couple things just to note on active cases right now. We have one case right now against the Public Service Alliance of Canada, where we're taking them to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. We're calling for the union to be held accountable for promoting an anti-Israel agenda that's fostering a culture of discrimination and harassment against its Jewish members. I'll tell you, we're anticipating, again, none of this is a surprise, we're all seeing it, but we're anticipating a lot more work that will have to be done in the lawfare space with respect to unions. We have notified that there are new BDS resolutions coming in within some of the unions, but there will be a legal avenue to pursue in a number of these different cases. Another big thing that hopefully you've noticed in some of the communications we've sent out, but last week, Canadian families who lost loved ones in the horrific Hamas terrorist attack are working together with CIJA and asked to file a federal court application challenging the government of Canada's decision to resume funding for UNRWA. So just a note here on how we can do this and what that means. Under Canadian law, funding can only be advanced to organizations that respect Canadian values and also adhere to international human rights standards. UNRWA has well-documented links to Hamas, a terrorist organization under Canadian law. They've already been recognized as a terrorist organization under Canadian law. So by resuming Canadian funding to UNRWA, the government is in violation of its own anti-terrorism legislation. So we need to hold them accountable for that. And that's why we've moved forward with this lawsuit. I also should note some just significant new developments with Toronto Police and sort of their hate crimes campaign. We've now seen that several arrests related to hate crimes and assaults have been made over the last few weeks in Toronto. There was an 80-year-old who was charged for multiple incidents of anti-Semitic graffiti, and we've seen this obviously popping up everywhere. And multiple people were arrested at the pro-Palestinian march for various charges, including assaults against police officers and a police horse that you've seen. I'm sure you've seen. The Toronto Police held a press conference calling out a group of individuals who are consistently acting as agitators and becoming increasingly confrontational and violent. One of the things that UJA and CIJA has been able to do is to help police understand who these agitators are and to frankly help get them the information they need to make some of these arrests. So a very important role that we can play as a community. The police have made it clear that while freedom of expression is a protected right, and we know they've been saying this throughout, it has limits when it crosses hate and violence. So since October 12th, the hundreds of aggressive anti-Israel protests have actually cost the police more than $12 million. They want to crack down on this as well, but we need to help them understand how they can crack down on this. And we need to provide them also with and lobby the government to provide political support and protection for police when they do stand up to arrest these agitators. So the Toronto Police have also launched a hate crime awareness campaign with Crime Stoppers. We should note that. The campaign was going to educate and encourage members of the community to report these hate crimes and other forms of criminality to the police or anonymously through Toronto Crime Stoppers. You're going to start to see posters that you can download, and there'll also be a radio public service announcement, which we'll be launching as well. If we have information on that, or we have some information, I should say, that also can be dropped in the chat now for everyone as well. A couple of other quick things to note before we move on. One is with respect to the Walk with Israel. So we've been getting many questions about the walk this year. I'm going to state the obvious, which is there's never been a more important time than now to show up at the walk and to bring everyone you know, Jews, non-Jewish allies, friends, family, peers, coworkers, to come and to stand together. We have to be at the walk this year. There is no way that we can possibly mitigate, quiet, stop the walk. We are going to be there. We are going to be safe and secure. We are going to be present, and we need to show up. On June 9th, we have to send a powerful message to the whole city that we support Israel and that they have to emerge as stronger than they were before October 7th. So a note on the walk every year, all the money raised through the walk is dedicated to helping Israel. This year, obviously, Israeli victims and communities as they recover and rebuild. 100% of the money that is raised will be going directly to Israel. We've got a lot of questions around security. So first of all, important to note that the walk against Israel, I'm sure many of you have seen sort of these social media posts and things like that, where people are trying to mobilize and frankly intimidate our community about the walk. This isn't new. Every year we have a group of protesters. Every single year we have a group of protesters and agitators who want to intimidate us and frankly scare our community so we don't show up and we don't walk. Security is always our top priority, and every single year we meet extensively with the police to make sure that they can also show up to protect our community. Now, I want to provide a little more color on how this works, because we have to note that when you see these aggressive pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian protests take place, they are not permitted. These are not permitted protests. And so they don't have the full force of the police who are there to develop a security plan with our community. When we host the Walk with Israel every year, the route and the parade, or not the parade, sorry, the route and the festival at the end, these are permitted events that we work on in collaboration with the police. And so emergency services and Toronto police are accountable for making sure that we are safe and secure. It is completely different than an unpermitted protest or rally or something like that. So, number one, the protesters come out every year. I don't think this year will be any different. Number two, you've seen recently, even as recent as this past weekend, where there was a rally at Nathan Phillips Square. These things take place. They are secure. They are safe. Thank God we haven't had incidents to date. UJ Community Security and the police are now, as I said, working on a plan to make sure that our route and the festival at the end are safe again this year. We have a detailed security plan that's already been worked on. And it's not just police. We also have extensive private security that UJA layers on top of the police presence. But we should be able, and we will be able, to walk safely and without obstruction. On that, we're also consulting with some of the top lawyers in our community to look at legal options to make sure that we can keep protesters away. And again, to make sure that our route is safe and secure. So, just a final note on this, I honestly believe that this is the most important walk that we've ever had. Please come. Please bring your friends. Please bring your families. Please raise funds for the walk this year. I know years ago, everyone went door to door and would solicit small gifts for the walk. Now is the time to do that again, because, our CEO, Adam Minsky, Jeff Rosenthal, our chair of our board, and myself and a number of other leaders, we've been in deep conversations now with these communities and with the Israelis on what it is going to take to rebuild in Israel. And as you can imagine, it's significant. We need to be able to raise funds to help them with rebuilding, and frankly, with the mental health support that they're going to need to be resilient as we move forward. The last thing that I'd like to share before passing it over to my colleague, Ryla, is really about another that's come up a lot, which is the Peel Nakba Day, the Peel School Board Nakba Day. We've been hearing concerns from parents about this Nakba Day that was introduced a year ago. I want to be clear. This is something that was introduced at the Peel District School Board a year ago, not the past couple of weeks. Just as horrific, makes no difference, but this is the first time that it will actually be observed in the school board. And it's horrible. It's a horrific thing, and we need to fight back against this. We know that when they talk about Nakba Day, they're referring to the War of Independence in Israel in 1948, and it's associated with calls by extremist organizations for violence and threats towards the Jewish community and the world. This is a horrific thing, and we cannot allow for it to take place at the Peel District School Board, and we also can't allow for it to spread to other school boards. We totally understand that parents at other schools are concerned about spreading to other school boards. And right now, I have to say that we're working with both people inside government, people at the school boards, people at the school level, to make sure that this doesn't follow suit. The other schools and other school boards don't follow suit. And right now, at this moment, no indication that TDSB is going to be following this. But again, we're going to be monitoring this very, very closely for any developments. And we're happy to report back as things evolve on this, on these calls and in emails to the community. I'll tell you that our partners at CEJA and the legal task force are working closely to also look at legal avenues to address this concern. There are also some phenomenal people working at the grassroots level in the community that we're going to help to support, who are doing just fabulous work, pushing it back against Nakba Day in Peel. But again, sometimes people within the system, Jewish community members who are showing leadership, are on the front lines, have some phenomenal insight to how we can actually address this. And UJ is going to be supporting those individuals. If you have concerns about anti-Semitism at your school, please reach out to your local public school trustees or your school administration to book a meeting. And if you feel that your concerns are not being adequately addressed, please reach out to the legal task force and we're happy to support you. If there are incidents of anti-Semitism that your child has experienced or someone in your family, someone who's in one of these schools, UJA, CEJA, and Pro Bono Ontario have launched something called the Combating Anti-Semitism in Schools Project. So it's a free legal service for low and moderate income families whose children have experienced anti-Semitism in school. Volunteer lawyers, not just through the Legal Task Force, but through Pro Bono Ontario, are actually going to be able to bring these complaints forward and help negotiate solutions where the students feel unable to resolve conflicts with the school administrators. So we can also drop that in the chat, the link for Pro Bono Ontario in this particular project. There are resources that we can access and we have to use those resources. One last note here, just going back to the big picture of what the strategy is going to be moving forward. I've been focusing on some of these micro tactics that we're using, but we need to sort of, again, take a step back and look at the big pillars. And right now I want to talk about three things. Accountability for anti-Semites. We've talked a little bit about that with lawfare. Relationships with allies, building out it's both formal relationships with leadership of allied groups, faith and ethnic communities, and also empowering Jewish activists, making sure that those of you on this call right now have the tools that you need to fight back, the messages, the email, the calls to action, to make phone calls, to show up at events, things like that. And we've been doing that. We've actually had more than 5,000 engaged activists just in the past few weeks alone who are getting our activist updates and following through by being in touch with elected officials and using some of the tools that we're providing. So we'll share in the chat again an email address that you can use to sign up for activist updates if you're not getting those. These are emails that are coming out every couple of days with very specific calls to action that you can use to guide your your own personal fight against anti-Semitism, and you can share that as well. There is a lot to do, and we want to focus on the ways to take action. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ryla Bramer, to talk about a few ways that you can help.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for joining us today. I wanted to share 4 upcoming opportunities to mobilize, tell you a little bit about them, remind you that you can learn more about each one as I share in our activist report, which Sarah just referenced, and also through links that will be posted in our chat. So first of all, I wanted to acknowledge the statement that was released by Pride Toronto last week, and to share that our goal is always to ensure that the Jewish community feels safe, comfortable, and heard in whatever space they want to be in. And so our number one priority right now is to work towards creating a safe space for LGBTQ+ Jews and allies to be able to share their Jewish identities, their relationship with Israel, as Pride Month is coming upon us shortly. There are a number of ways that you can get involved in ensuring that this happens. We have an LGBTQ+ division at UJA, and there is an event on April 19th, a call to hear from the community and allies and to brainstorm together. And details about that call that you are welcome to join will be sent out. There is also a WhatsApp group where people share ideas, concerns, and strategies for addressing issues as they arise. We do have the Walk with Israel on June 9th, which is a beautiful, inclusive community event for all members of our community and all allies who support our community. And we're looking at ways to recruit allies, LGBTQ+ community members to participate in both Pride Parade, but other events and opportunities in the month of June and in the times after, to ensure safe and welcoming space for all. With our partners at CJPAC, there is an opportunities for mobilization training, a crash course, if you will, on strategic engagement, the democratic processes at the different levels of government, and ways in which we can make our voice heard, stand up, speak out through letters, through meetings, through phone calls. It's a really amazing and concise opportunity for a little crash course, if you already know, and some real eye-opening education. This is your first foray into mobilization in the political sphere. I also wanted to share around the safe access legislation. CJA sent out a joint letter signed by a board of diverse allies to Premier Ford, asking the government to protect minority communities with safe access legislation. This legislation would provide religious and cultural spaces with a safe zone that would protect them from hateful protests and rallies in these essential community organizations. We encourage everyone to use this time to reach out to their local MPPs via email, through phone conversations, or by requesting meetings. And if anybody would like language around that, we are happy to provide some language so that we can make our voices heard as loudly and clearly as possible. And finally, I wanted to share just a little bit of information about our Parent Protector program. As is our goal in all spaces, safety and security of our staff and students at day schools is of critical importance. And members of each community know their community the best, the rhythms, the comings and goings of each individual school. It is the community members of that school who really know. And so we are looking at ways to empower that community of each school to be the eyes and ears, a watchful presence, a volunteer community watch, if you will. Right now, this is done through individual schools, information's provided, and it is our hope that in coming months, we will be able to expand this watchful community presence, the eyes and ears of the community, in different organizations where individuals are community members. And finally, we know that Passover is coming upon us, and I know I, like most of you, am thinking about the holiday that recognizes and celebrates our freedom at a time that feels so challenging right now. And I wanted to share that we know one of the best ways to bring people into our community to address Jew hatred or silence is to find opportunities for people outside our community to get to know and connect with the Jewish community. We are set to launch shortly a few different ways that you might use your own Passover Seder, your experiences around this holiday, to share with other people who might not know about this, whether it's inviting guests you wouldn't normally invite to participate in your Passover Seder, finding ways to have conversations about the holiday in your workplace, and in places you are during your leisure time, and thinking about ways at your Seder you might integrate conversation, you might save an empty seat for those who are still hostage, and ways in which we can both celebrate Passover, but also acknowledge this very unique time in the history of Israel and the history of the Jewish people. So those are but a few ways in which the community is mobilizing, taking action. We are continuously growing this list, seeking new opportunities to engage, and also really interested in hearing from you about issues of concern, about spaces that could use some gathering or mobilization. And our best initiatives are always a collaboration with our community And so we look forward to hearing about those and for you to tap into any or all of these that speak to your abilities, interests, and spaces.
Okay, great. I'm going to jump in there and start by thanking Ryla and Sarah for this really great overview of some of the latest developments and ways that people can help. I'm going to get right into the Q&A because we have a lot of questions that have come through. And I'm going to start with, someone has asked about, and I think it's really, really smart question. Someone has asked about whether or not there's any concern with our strategy being adopted or co-opted by our adversaries. The more that we talk about what we're doing and how we're trying to strengthen the community, we also see that many of the things that we as a community are doing and saying, our adversaries are twisting that against us and trying to use it for their own story. I'll start by saying this is a balancing act. On the one hand, we want to keep our community as involved as possible. We want to update you. We want to be as transparent as possible. At the same time, there are initiatives underway that we can't publicly discuss. There are a number of legal actions, for example, that are in the works that we can't yet publicly discuss. There are extensive security operations and planning that we can't publicly discuss. And so both for operational reasons, but also because we don't actually want to make our adversaries' job easier. Whether it's the protesters, whether it's the BDS movement, we want to strike the right balance between keeping our community informed without giving away too much of our playbook. So taking that into account, there are some things that we can share. First, people have asked about the April 15th economic shutdown that's been announced by the anti-Israel movement. We're aware of this. Our security team is monitoring it. It's a global initiative. It's not just in Toronto, but they're monitoring the Toronto specific aspect of this. Obviously, the security team is constantly engaging with Toronto Police as well as York Regional Police. When we find out about protests taking place or actions from anti-Israel protesters that are announced, and usually they're announced in advance because they want to mobilize their community, we share a lot of that information with police, and we ensure that first and foremost, any Jewish institutions, and not just Jewish institutions, it may be businesses that are Jewish or really any part of our community that's impacted directly by these actions, we reach out to them and ensure that they have a plan in place to ensure that they're secure, that they can remain open, and that people coming and going can be accessing their facility. Our first and foremost priority is to ensure that the community is strong, supported, and has security expertise at the click of a button or at the drop of a phone call in order to get the help they need. So we are on top of the April 15th economic shutdown. It's difficult to say whether or not this is going to be a massive thing in Toronto. I think it's too early to say that. Frankly, it's not likely to be that different from what we've seen over the last few months. It will just be a new version of the same. As I think was shared earlier, police have had to manage not dozens, hundreds of protests. In fact, nearly 1,000 anti-Israel protests have taken place since October 7th in Toronto alone. And so, people have asked as well about our strategy for managing these protests. And maybe Sarah and Ryla, I'll dive into this one right away. Really, there's three things we're looking to do in terms of managing these protests. The first is this: protecting our community. And when protesters target a Jewish institution, and we've seen this in Montreal specifically, when they are emboldened to crowd out a Jewish institution, not only is there potential for violence, this is directly intimidating, and it's actually obstructing the community from going about its business. So the first priority we have is to ensure that when anti-Israel protesters convene, there is a clear buffer between where they're convening and where our community is, which is why, to Ryla's point, we're pushing for safe access legislation that will ban protests from taking place within close proximity to Jewish institutions. We're very pleased that the city of Vaughan, the mayor of the city of Vaughan, has called for a bylaw that would create a buffer of 100 meters for any such protests, so that an anti-Israel group would not be able to come within 100 meters of a synagogue, for example. And if they did so, they would be subject to a $100,000 penalty. So the first thing we focus on is ensuring that Jewish life is not disrupted and that we can continue to be safely and openly Jewish in this community. The second thing we focus on is ensuring that once that buffer is in place, that police have the information they need and clearly understand our concerns as a community, and that they are doing what they need to do to enforce the law. Our message to police since October 7th has been consistent. We're very concerned about incitement and hatred at these rallies. We're concerned about glorification of terrorism, and we're concerned about the potential for violence at these rallies. And so the first thing we ask of police is to ensure that when laws are broken, that they are enforced. We've seen several dozen arrests in the last few months of anti-Israel protesters. We've seen there are times where police, in order to develop the evidence to be able to stand up in court, those arrests sometimes take place after a protest. They may not take place in the moment of a protest, but from our perspective, it's most important that if police are going to be laying charges against someone, I understand, and I think we all understand, that police need to have the evidence that they need in order for those charges to hold up in court. So when we see that the line between free speech and hate speech is crossed, when we see that there's a risk of violence or that violence is actually taking place, our message to police is that they're there to enforce the law. And it's really up to the police to determine when the law has been broken. That's not our role as average citizens. It is our role as average citizens to flag to police and to report to police when we see something that's wrong. And so when in doubt, report it. Unless you're a police officer, it's not your job to interpret the law, but it is your job as a citizen to call the police when you see something's happening. And when community members have quickly reported incidents, it really makes it much, much easier for police to follow up and to arrest people. We've seen quick results when that has happened. So again, this isn't going to be something we're going to solve right now. As long as these anti-Israel protests are continuing, we know that criminal behavior is going to be taking place in certain cases. And so we're going to be continuing to communicate to police that they need to be extremely vigilant in enforcing the law at these protests. But the third element of our strategy is really about going beyond the law. There are many things in this country that someone can do that spread anti-Semitism, but don't cross a legal boundary. Freedom of expression obviously doesn't include hate speech, but there are many ways to spread lies about Jews, lies about Israel, to spread misinformation and conspiracy theories that don't necessarily cross the legal threshold. And so we know from our public opinion research that Canadians don't like these protests. In fact, shortly after October 7th, when we conducted a public opinion study, we found that just a few weeks after October 7th, a strong majority of Canadians already recognized that these pro-Palestinian protests, and we framed it that way in the poll, that these protests are actually tainted by anti-Semitism. So the more that protesters are in the streets screaming, covering their faces, intimidating our community, and really just spreading vile stuff, the more they're actually alienating the Canadian mainstream. And so a big part of our strategy is A, to ensure our institutions are safe, B, that criminal charges are actually being laid where criminal acts take place, but C, when we see that anti-Semitism is spreading at these protests, frankly, just shining a light on this and exposing for Canadians that this is happening in our city, that alone is spreading an important message to most Canadians who don't follow these issues closely, that hate is taking place in our city, and Canadians don't like that. The data holds that up, and so a big part of our strategy is to expose these protests. And through our No Room for Terror campaign on Instagram, and I'll ask the team to drop the address into the chat, a big part of our strategy is to leverage social media to highlight these protests and expose the hate that's taking place in our city, because this is frankly alienating people from the anti-Israel movement. This is not winning over supporters to the anti-Israel movement. And so we want to frankly name and shame and expose what's happening in our city so that Canadians start to understand that this isn't a distant overseas issue. This is about hate taking place right here in the GTA. The only other thing I want to touch on, a few people have asked what we're doing related to foreign funding of extremism here in Canada. Groups, either foreign groups or in some cases domestic groups that are extreme, that are funding anti-Israel activities or directly engaged in them. What can be done to address the challenge at its source? I'm going to ask the team to drop into the chat another link. Our advocacy agency, CJA, is calling on the Government of Canada to list one particular, among many, but one particular organization, Samidoun, which is at the forefront of a lot of these protests. We're calling on the government to list this organization as a terrorist group. If you'll take a look at the link below, there's a few more details there, and you can add your name to a petition calling on Public Safety Canada to list this group as a terror group, because right now it's not listed as a terror group. If you look at Samidoun is linked to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a listed terrorist group in this country that's been involved in many terrorist attacks, stretching back to the 70s. Samidoun has existed for about 12 or 13 years now. It is one of the drivers of a lot of the protests taking place right now. And if you look at Samidoun's activity online, if you listen to what Samidoun's representatives are saying at protests, they are openly glorifying terrorism. They are openly glorifying violence against Jews. Some anti-Israel protesters tend to use coded language that insulates them. Samidoun is very open about what it stands for. And we believe there is a critical mass of evidence that this organization, which has global reach, that this organization isn't simply an aggressive advocacy organization. It is effectively a terrorist group and should be listed as such under Canadian law. So if you click on the link below, there's some more details, and you can add your name to call on the government of Canada to finally hold Samidoun accountable. And it's important that an organization that's engaged in terrorism be put on that list, because as soon as an organization's on that list, it's illegal to donate to them. It's illegal to be a member of them. And people who engage in these activities can be subject to criminal charges. So please take action, click on the link in the chat, and help us send a strong message to Ottawa that while there are many toxic players out there, this is one of the most toxic, and there's an immediate action the government could take to finally hold them accountable. With that, someone had asked about the walk, and I think I want to go back to that because a lot of people are concerned about the walk this year. It's top of mind for us, of course, and the team is working really hard to ensure that we have the best possible walk experience, not just in terms of safety and security, but ensuring as many community members as possible can participate and be meaningfully engaged. Sarah, why don't I turn this one over to you to talk about? Do you want to touch on the walk a bit more?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So yeah, a number of people have asked questions about the tone, the messaging, the communications around the walk for the year. Steve and I have been working very closely to make sure that the tone is representative, frankly, of where we're at as a community. And so, you'll notice that the gathering at the end isn't so much a party and a festival with rides. It's a gathering experience for everyone to come together in community. And it's totally appropriate for children, and we'll have music and things like that. But it's a moment for us to come together and to rally rather than the normal sort of party atmosphere that you would have. Still will be an incredibly meaningful experience for families and families with young kids, but really people of any age and stage will feel at home in the walk this year, and the tone will reflect it. Another question was asked just about our overall messaging and how we project the meaning of the walk to our allies and frankly to the broader Canadian community. And I think with everything, when Steve and I and our colleagues talk about how we're positioning our narrative and how we're frankly having a conversation about the reality that exists right now, it has to be about terrorism and radicalization and terror against democracy and Canadian values. And that's where we're at as Jews. And so when we show up at the walk, we're showing up as Canadian Jews, and we're standing for all the things that we stand for, both as Canadians and as Jewish Canadians and as pro-Israel Canadians. We're there celebrating the same values that exist in Israel and in Canada. And I think that that's where there has to be a focus on our messaging this year. When we call on allies and non-Jewish community members to join us at the walk, it's because as Canadians, we have to fight for these freedoms. And we have to stand up against terror and all the things that Steve was just talking about. And so, I think when you're speaking with, again, non-Jewish allies, peers, friends, family, coworkers, all of those things, make it about that. Make it about standing up for Canadian values. And that's why we have to join the walk this year, because it's more important than ever to fight back against this radical terror that we're all facing collectively. It is a shared threat. Like, let's not, be mistaken. Steve, sorry, I think that addresses most of the questions on the walk.
Okay, I just want to circle back to the April 15th anti-Israel protests. So just to update people, because a number of people have asked what's the shutdown, et cetera. Anti-Israel protesters, we've seen this primarily outside of Toronto for the most part, though certainly some of this has happened in Toronto. Anti-Israel protesters are increasingly using what they would call civil disobedience. I think we would characterize it differently, to not just protest, but to try to block business with Israel. So we've seen attempts to block shipping to Israel, for example, on the West Coast. There is a global campaign to encourage the anti-Israel movement to engage in dissimilar disruptive activity in cities around the world. Right now, it's still not clear whether this is going to be a massive thing that takes place in Toronto. In all likelihood, it's not going to be a massive disruption. It's likely to be on par with the protests we've seen in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So, stay tuned for more information. Whenever we find out, by the way, about information that is important for the community to know for your own safety and security, we communicate that publicly. And if you're not on our, I imagine everyone on this call is on our email list. If you're on our email list, you're going to get those updates. If you also are active on WhatsApp and you would like to join our WhatsApp list, please, you'll see on screen ways to join the WhatsApp list. We are monitoring this April 15th event very closely. We will communicate if there's any reason to communicate to community members about disruption to our community institutions or to businesses in the Jewish community. But right now, there's no indication of that at this stage. So stay tuned. We will update you. But really, the long and short of it is this is more of the same from the anti-Israel movement. They're looking to make our lives miserable. They're looking to intimidate our community, and we can't fall for that. We need to be strong. We need to continue doing the strategic actions that we know are really going to move the needle on anti-Semitism, and also really to bolster the community's pride and ensure that Jews at the Walk, but also elsewhere, can feel proud to stand up for who we are and to be open about who we are. The other thing that people have asked about is whether or not these sessions are recorded and whether people can receive a copy of them, whether to share with friends or whatnot. Please sign up for our email newsletters, because every Friday after these Thursday webinars, we provide a recording for the whole community to see, because we know that there are many people who can't necessarily attend a noon webinar on a Thursday. And really, we want the information we're sharing in today's webinar and all of our webinars to be shared widely. So yes, we do provide a recording. You'll see it in your inbox tomorrow in our Friday newsletter. The other thing that someone asked about is whether there's one site or one place where we can find all of these links, where to report graffiti, how to contact the legal task force, really kind of all of these things as a one-stop shop. We're going to take that away as a fantastic suggestion. If you sign up for the activist update, which is really the most important thing you should sign up for, we do provide a lot of that information, but frankly, you shouldn't have to sign up for the activist update to receive all of that. So I'm going to take that one away with the team, and we'll make sure there's a place on our website, which is kind of a one-stop shop to receive help, to find out more information. There are a lot of great resources out there. A big part of the challenge is figuring out just how to access them. So stay tuned. We're going to take that away and try to make it even easier for people to access information. I'm just looking through the questions right now. Sarah and Ryla, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is really important for people to know?
I had a couple questions come in. I'm just looking here about campus, and I just wanted to reassure people it's not just Lawfare on campus that's there to support the students. You can only imagine how these students are feeling in terms of showing up to class and hearing from professors who are using or abusing, I should say, their podium and speaking out against them. It's a very complicated dynamic at play on campus, and so there are many great organizations on campus right now that are doing important work. I know that Hillel, who's a very close partner of ours, is doing a lot to both arm students with the facts that they need to push back, both in class and outside of class and extracurriculars and things like that. They're also trying to create spaces for students to come together and really have discussions about how they can stand up and stand strong and be proud, because it's a really deflating experience right now on some of these campuses. And so we are lucky in that we have many campus organizations who are doing incredible work. But I can tell you that from speaking with my colleagues at Hillel multiple times a week, they are really trying to push the students to be active and be loud and to stand strong. And they'll continue to do that and to provide the students with the resources that they need to do that work. And it's hard. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else here. One other question, I'm sorry. One other question people are asking. Some people are wondering about taking on leadership roles in the community. I'll make a note to say the thing that concerns me most since October 7th is finding a way to empower community members to take on really important roles and to feel that they can stand up and they have the facts they need to be loud and to be proud. And, you know, we need all of the leaders that we can get. We need strong, talented people to take on volunteer roles in the community, volunteer leadership roles in the community, frankly, to come work in the community if people are interested. There are so many opportunities to contribute right now. And I appreciate that you're taking time out of your day to dial in. That is something that's fantastic because you can relay this information. But if you are looking to take on a bigger role in the community, whether it's just to volunteer on something or to take on a leadership role, please send us an email at info@jewishtoronto.com. Again, like we've shared this link in the chat many times, and we can put it in the follow-up email. And we're happy to help you find the right place to land so you can really contribute in a very significant way. And thank you for those who are asking. Steve, over to you.
Okay, I'm just looking through the chat right now. Yeah, lots of interesting questions. A number of people have asked about media bias, and I'm just going to jump in there very quickly. We've shared this on previous calls, so I know this is kind of recapping a little bit. We work very closely with Honest Reporting, which is a really great organization, and together, Honest Reporting and CJA as well directly engage media to point out distortion, bias, misinformation, and really to hold media accountable. And not just to hold media accountable, but also to highlight examples where the media does get it right. Because there are some examples of media, you know, providing a look at stories of the Israeli experience that we really want to share and amplify. If you are not yet connected to Honest Reporting, go to honestreporting.ca and really sign up for their newsletter, because they too send out alerts. We also share those alerts in order to ensure they reach more people. They often send out alerts to ask community members to write to this media outlet, write to that producer or this editor. And I know it can feel like sort of like you're boiling the ocean. Like there's so much of this. How do we speak out? The more volume of feedback that media outlets receive, the more it really does shape their view of how to manage the issue. So speak up. Point out when you see really great content from a media outlet. If you hear an interview with an Israeli or see a story about an Israeli perspective that's really good, email the editor. Let them know that I really appreciated you covered this. And likewise, when you see something that's just really distorted, that's problematic, first check out to see if Honest Reporting has put out an alert about it. And even if you see something that Honest Reporting hasn't necessarily touched on, go ahead and email the editor. Let them know. Say that you were, as a reader or as a viewer, really upset by coverage. Because they're hearing from the other side, I can tell you. And they're taking into account the reader feedback that they're getting. So please make your voice known, but connect with Honest Reporting in particular, as well as CJA, if there's anything that you see that's really concerning where you want to kind of mobilize the whole community to speak out. I'm just looking at a number of people have asked questions in the thread about members of the Jewish community that may be supporting the pro-Palestinian anti-Israel agenda. This comes up, obviously, in the community. And I think it's an example of how we as a community need to be strong in our knowledge and in our identity as Jews. It is so important that while we fight anti-Semitism and look outside of our community, that we don't take for granted our community. We don't take for granted our kids, our students on campus. Post October 7th, we're seeing a real awakening of Jewish identity. Sarah and I and Ryla and others on the team have done a lot of meetings with community members in people's homes and here at our offices. I've never seen the community disengaged. I've never seen this many people wanting to make a difference. People who tell us things like, I took Israel for granted before. Never again am I going to take Israel for granted. Now I get it. Now I understand. And And so there's a real moment of the community stepping up in its pride and its identity. We also see that there are fringe players within the Jewish community that don't support Israel's right to exist, that are willing to use their Jewish identity to be a hechsher, so to speak, a kosher stamp for the anti-Israel movement. At the end of the day, I think it's pretty obvious to the world that those voices, for the most part, are not that representative. They're extreme. They give the anti-Israel movement the ability to say, we're not anti-Semitic, we're simply anti-Zionist, which we all know that that's false. They are one and the same. But I think it's incumbent on all of us when people ask us about this. Well, what about the Jewish person I know who doesn't like Israel? What about the Jewish person I saw in the media calling for Israel to be subject to sanctions? These people exist. And I think it's really important that we be armed with the facts to explain to people that those voices, while they have a right to say what they want to say, they're not representative of the Jewish experience. And I'll give you one fact that'll help you make that case. When we've done public opinion research within the Jewish community, and the last major study that we conducted of Jewish opinions, we found that almost 9 in 10 Jewish Canadians, 9 in 10, said that caring about Israel is either essential or important to their Jewish identity. So if you want to, kind of rely on the 1 in 10 members of the Jewish community who say I'm against Israel, and ignore the 9 in 10 Jewish community members who say actually Israel isn't just another country; it's a part of who I am as a person. One can do that, but they're not being genuine about how representative those voices are. So when we hear lies and misinformation being spread by anyone, we have to challenge it. And I think the most important thing to challenge is the idea that Jews are not Zionists. 9 in 10 Canadian Jews are Zionists. It's as pure and simple as that. And we need to own that. We need to be proud of that. And we need to explain to people that those who oppose Israel's existence, no matter their identity, are frankly quite extreme. And they're off base with where most Canadians are at, let alone where most Canadian Jews are at. With that, I think we're going to wrap up. We do have a lot of questions in the chat about various different issues. I'm going to ask people to, if your question wasn't answered, I'm going to ask you to send us an email. You can email us, you'll see on screen. You can email us, first off, sign up for any of these newsletters, but email us at info@jewishtoronto.com. That's info@jewishtoronto.com. If you have a question, if you have an idea, if you're looking for help with something, email us at that email address. We'll triage all the emails that come in and ensure we connect you with the right person on the team to support you. But with that, I'm going to wrap up the call right now. I'm going to thank Sarah and Ryla for being a part of this, and thank really the hundreds of community members who joined us for this call. Really speaks volumes to have this many people dedicating an hour in the middle of their day for an update. We hope this was helpful. We are going to have the next webinar update after Pesach, and so we're going to make sure that we wish all of you an early Chag Sameach. As Ryla said, make your Seder different this year by ensuring that you take the events of October 7th, you take the experience of the hostages, that you take what we're dealing with in the past 6 months, and you find a way to meaningfully acknowledge it at your Seder, and of course to invite someone who isn't necessarily going to be attending a Seder to your table, whether they're a member of the Jewish community who may not be as involved, or frankly, someone who's not Jewish. They could be a neighbor, a friend, a colleague. Bring them to the Seder, because we can send a powerful message to our neighbors about who we are and what our values are by bringing them into our homes and showing them who we are. So don't miss the opportunity of the Seder to do some outreach. And we look forward to speaking with you all after the Chag. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please reach out to us if there's anything we can do to support you.